Welcome to the brand new Badger247 Show. I'm Matt Perkins, joined by new writer for Badger247, Jon McNamara, my old buddy, and Badger beat reporter from Badger247, Nick Osen. I'm excited to have a little fun with you guys here.
Yeah, man, excited to be here. I can't wait to let this out to the world. Been sitting on it for a while and hinting at it and talking about it behind the scenes. I'm excited, man. It's a start to a fresh start for me, joining up with Nick and hopefully bringing some old people over from where we were before. I can't wait. I can't wait to get going. It's cool to see us all on screen together, and appreciate you making this work, Matt. Appreciate you popping on, Nick, and I'm excited for the future. Couldn't be at a better time with OVs hitting us right now.
Yeah, guys, this is a really good time to get going. Obviously, Perko, great to get it going a little bit with you, John. We've had a lot of fun discussions, man. Obviously, at this point, kind of the news is starting to get out, like you mentioned. Super, excited, grateful, fortunate to have you. And I think the 3 or 4 of us are going to make a hell of a team.
I'm really looking forward to it as well. So yeah, our plan, right now, if you've been with me and John before, you kind of know what we do. Talking recruiting, talk a little bit of everything, but focusing on recruiting. We're going to be trying to crank these out at least once a week here going forward with the 3 of us. And John, it's exciting to sort of have a new place in a new form and hopefully a new audience to jump along for the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. We had the shows about moving on and everything that happened there, and this was just like a really, really unique opportunity with special people. To be quite honest with you, I was ready for something different, ready to maybe move in a different path, and the timing was wild when I got in touch with some guys from 24/7. Obviously a site that I've watched for a while and went toe to toe with for a very long time. So just a ton of respect for the guys over there and what they've built. And, the people that I've talked to already, I think they want to know like what I'm going to be doing there. My biggest thing is I just want to bring good content and work as a team with them. There's no egos. There's not me coming over and saying this is the way we're going to do it. I'm just trying to fit in right away, see where I fit in, just continue to bring what fans and readers and subscribers have known from me for 20 years over to 24/7 onto that message board, into that community. And, like I said, I couldn't be more excited because there's really strong pieces in place there. And I hope just to complement that team and just enhance the coverage there for Wisconsin fans.
Yeah, John, I'm surprised you didn't do a commitment graphic or a commitment video. We can have you like walking out in slow-mo into the offices, put up the hashtag AGTG with that announcement, after long consideration, discussions with my family and prayer, I've decided to commit to Badger247. I think that would be a lot of fun for us.
I couldn't do it without a respect my decision and with some praying hands, like the kids like to do. But yeah, I mean, that might be in the works.
Yeah, you'll love to see Perko.
I know. I love to see it. Well, let's get in, Nick, to talking about official visits here this weekend. It's the first weekend of the spring officials, and it's the biggest one. They have so many high priority targets on campus. I think that the Ben Wenzel recruitment has been really interesting because he's a guy who didn't get a lot of pub really going into his junior year, and he exploded in Appleton this year. I think that Oklahoma offer, John and I have talked about this before, was a real eye-opener for a lot of people. But Nick, it seems like he's gonna stay home. Would you say he's the most likely guy to commit this weekend?
Yeah, I would say he's in that top 2 range or so, Perko. I think there are about maybe 2 to 3 guys that have felt really, really good, like that level. I know that I made a pick for Wenzel just because I got to speak with him recently after that official offer. And while I do think there's still a chance, obviously Oklahoma has an OB set, just getting to know him a little bit, checking in around the recruitment, like this seems like a young man that it'd be very hard to pass up that in-state Badgers opportunity. Plus, I mean, you look at how they've recruited inside linebacker, even just the last 2 cycles. Really, really good. You've got Aiden Reeder in the fold now. I think that'd be a really nice compliment with kind of some of the potential options on the outside right now going forward, guys.
Yeah, John, what do you think he brings, as a compliment to Reader? Because Reader so far in his high school career has definitely played more on the edge than he has as an off-ball guy. But Wenzel's a guy who's been playing off-ball. I don't want to say I'm necessarily worried that he's a Midwest Mike and doesn't necessarily have the foot speed to play in 2025 or I guess 2026 and beyond in his case. Do you think, John, that he has the requisite athleticism at this point in his career to be a contributor, in the mold of look at the guys they have on the roster right now, right? Christian Allegro, Tackett Curtis, Mason Post, the freshman. You look at that frame. Does Wenzel have that same sort of upside?
To me, he does. And it seems to kind of be the movement at that inside linebacker spot where, I don't know that they're going for more length, but I also do think they're going for some more length there. Wenzel 6'3", almost 220. Reader's up there 2'6", 6'4", longer guys on that inside to kind of follow those Christian Allegros. They move Thomas Heiberger from outside to inside. So I think they want to get longer, rangier on the inside, and Wenzel does that for you. I think he's probably more a traditional inside linebacker compared to Reader. I think you could do a number of things with Reader, but the more you watch that film, the more you feel like he could fit into what they want to do there. He's not one of those big jumbo edges, obviously. Maybe not. I think he could be a pass rusher if he wanted him to, but just the guy who's going to be able to clean up what's in front of him. Like I said, long, rangy. I think there's a lot of boxes that he checks there, and just kind of the overall philosophy maybe changing a bit. Like you're not, like you talked about, Matt, you're not going to see those Midwest Mikes, those 5'11", 240-pound middle linebackers. I think they want to have guys with some more length, maybe some more athletic ability in the mold of Allegro, Thomas Heiberger, those type of guys.
Yeah, Landon Gauthier as well, I think, is another guy who fits that mold for them as well. Nick, you mentioned you thought Wenzel's probably top 2 or 3 guys most likely on commitment watch. Who else is up there for you?
Yeah, Matt, I have felt really good. He actually just had a birthday, Arthur Scott. I have felt really good about that D-line target. Now, I think there's a chance there that potentially he'll maybe look to see other visits because a lot of this has come quickly for him, similar to like a Djidjou Bah, seeing a lot of new offers of late. But just speaking with him a couple times, especially right after that Wisconsin offer, he's quickly formed a relationship with E.J. Whitlow. I think academics are really important to him. And Wisconsin kind of got the ball rolling for him, guys, in terms of big offers. So I like the chances there. I know Zach Washington is a guy that I've kind of kept my eyes on a little bit. And then I still have maintained really throughout a recruitment that, Mac knows for sure, like it's been really intense and competitive at times. Like Amari Latimer, I have liked what the Badgers have done, in terms of really making him a priority. And we will see if they can continue to build that momentum going forward.
Yeah, I don't think there's a team that has been start to finish more than Wisconsin for Latimer. Obviously, his brother is big, but not game-changing type stuff. But yeah, like I said, from start to finish, whenever that finish line is going to be, Wisconsin's been there, prioritized him probably more than any other school. But if things kind of drag on for him, he's got some big-time programs that he plans to see. I don't think Wisconsin fans want him to get to Georgia at the end of June. That's a scary one if Georgia's still looking for a running back there. So, but like Nick said, Wisconsin, really good spot here. And then, you read behind just kind of read what's going on behind the scenes. Jamal Rule's not coming up anymore. It kind of seems like Latimer's their top guy. And, Ryan Estrada is too good to pass on. But that board has shrunk a little bit. I don't want to say they've completely cut ties, eliminated, because that never happens in recruiting. But the way things are kind of focused right now, it's Amari Latimer, and I think they feel really good about him heading into this weekend, getting him up on campus again.
Nick, let's talk about Jack Squared at tight end. I think tight end is going to be a really important position for this team in this cycle. Looks like they're targeting 2. Do you think we're getting Jack and Jack? There's a couple other names who are being thrown in there as well because, let's face it, tight end production has been almost non-existent for 2 years. And I would imagine that in the Grimes system, they're going to have more focus on the tight end. A lot of people thought with the transfer of Tanner Koziel, which was here for about a minute and a half, that might be something, but clearly it's not. So I personally think they have to get 2 tight ends, especially if you look at the last class with who's our local guy who had to retire due to injuries?
Booker, yeah.
Booker, losing Booker after 1 year, who was an athlete that they were really excited about. I like Grant Steck a lot, but I don't think he's really shown a ton yet that he's necessarily gonna be an impact player this year. So let's talk about these tight ends, because it's a position of need for Coach Letton. So Nick, do you think it's these two jacks? Do you think it's going to be someone else? Where do you see that position ending up in 26?
Yeah, Matt, I love how you kind of started that as well, because I think that might be the most fascinating position to me that I kind of wrote about it. It's interesting, obviously, two jacks. I'm not guaranteed or sold for sure. I think it's going to kind of depend on the numbers if they will take multiple, but I feel good about both guys here this weekend. I actually lean a little bit closer to Jack Siebers. I think that he would maybe care a little bit less in terms of like, okay, I got to go see these other visits. He took the Midwest tour. He liked Minnesota, but he loved Wisconsin. From my understanding, just checking around with people in that region, I think that the Badgers have felt pretty good coming into the weekend. If both guys wanted to call it this weekend, though, Matt and John, like, it might be hard to turn away either. And then that's maybe a spot, because those are two essentially plan A type guys at this point. So then maybe you take them both. Obviously, they bring a little different things. I love Siebers' speed, athleticism, multi-sport guy. Janda, I think, can be very physical. I think he plays in a good program over in Detroit area. So that'll be intriguing. I'll say this, though. I will be surprised if Wisconsin doesn't land at least one of those guys in the next 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, I think they push hard for both. I really do. I think they'd love to wrap up this class at tight end this weekend. Like Nick said, I think they'd have a really hard time saying no to one, yes to one. I think they would happily take both and call it a class. I would echo a lot of the stuff Nick said. Sievers going in this weekend feels like Wisconsin, probably on top, but I know that Oklahoma's pushing hard. If he gets to Oklahoma next weekend, I think he's got Boise next weekend. That one seems like it could be flipped out. I mean, that's kind of looking down the road a little bit. With these days, they feel like years, because there's so much that happens in these days and these hours. But if Oklahoma continues to push and he's uncommitted, they could come in that second weekend, and then that could really kind of turn that recruitment around quite a bit. But I really like where they stand with both going in. I think it's a 2 tight end class, and we'll see what happens in the next couple hours here.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating experience here at tight end. I'm also interested in offensive line. Kamari Blair is a really interesting name for me from my adopted state of Tennessee. He's a guy who's gotten an offer later in the process, and a guy who I don't necessarily think fits the same mold as a lot of the other guys they've recruited in the past couple classes. He's more of an athlete than a mauler at this point. And Nick, what do you think the odds are that he ends up a Badger in this class, and how many linemen do you think they're going to take? Is it just going to be 3? Do you think they'll try to get 4 or 5 again? Like, where do you think this offensive line is going?
Yeah, Matt. So I think that Kamari, the more I've gotten into this one a little bit the last couple weeks, while I wouldn't peg Wisconsin as the favorite right now, I do think they have a little bit of a better shot than people maybe expect. I have written that about a couple guys. Some of the 4 stars we'll get into, I'm sure. But, I feel like Blazik, as I'm sure you guys have talked about a lot too, he's a relationships guy. And I think there's a pretty strong one that has been formed there. The thing to me here is, like, he's a guy, it seems like he might take all those visits. And some of those programs have been involved longer. I know that the Vols made a pretty strong push over the unofficial about a week ago or so. So that'll be really intriguing. But this is just one of those opportunities. How I kind of wrote is, while I don't expect him to be, closed as a Badger this weekend, it's a momentum type of shit. So that's where I'm looking at. And Matt, where I'm at in terms of numbers, so obviously sitting at 2 right now, I think 5 would surprise me, just because they didn't have as many coming in early, and these last couple classes have been ridiculously good. Some guys already in the top 2s, as we've talked about before, John. So I think, to me, depends on who. I think at least 3, if you can get like a guy you really like a Blair, and then maybe an inside guy like a Jelani Miller, then 4 looks really, really good to me.
Yeah, 3 seems very safe, but there's guys that you bring up where you'd have a real hard time, especially a guy like you mentioned, Jelani. Like, you talk to him and he says, Wisconsin thinks I could play all 5 positions on the offensive line. So that's, like kind of a a bonus or a lottery ticket that you take and say, yeah, we'll take 4 because this guy can do a lot of different things for us. I said, I think 3's, probably the safe number there. I think tackle makes most sense to me. So, obviously you'd love to get Blair here if you're Wisconsin, but yeah, it could get to 4 if things go right in June. But I'd probably say 3 feels like a little bit safer bet right now.
John, I on the defensive side of the ball, on the defensive line, I know that you think Mchale Blade is probably the most talented guy coming to campus this weekend. Percentage chance, 5%, 10% that you think he ends up a Badger, and where do you think that they're going to keep going here on the defensive line, edge, whatever they're calling it now?
Yeah, I would put a little bit higher. I do think Notre Dame, Michigan, probably a tick above Wisconsin right now. And I think we talked about the last time we hopped on. It's, Blade is a guy that you look at him and say, oh, that's going to be a tough one for Wisconsin to win. But the dude has just kind of kept popping up on campus. He's here, he's there, he's back up, and he's like, oh, he's back. So, read what the guys are doing. What their actions do speak pretty loud. So, up there for the spring showcase, that's huge. You get them up here for your preferred weekend. I think that's huge too for Wisconsin. I know there's a lot of stuff that he likes about Wisconsin. Obviously, he's going to take that OV there. I think Matt Mitchell's done a really nice job there, close to home. That works in Wisconsin's favor. Academics are there as well. But he's not a guy that I would expect to pop this weekend. He's got a top 7. Like I said, Michigan, Notre Dame. I think those schools will ultimately be difficult to beat. USC's in there. I don't see him getting out to USC. I mean, he could visit there. Obviously, he's scheduled to. I think he's going to stay Midwest. But I think it's more than 10, maybe less than 60. So somewhere in between there. But Wisconsin's got a legit shot. You get a kid up there as many times as they have. I think they got a real good chance. And weird stuff can happen during his OVs. So I wouldn't count any of these guys out.
No, John, I was smiling early in your response there. I can tell we're going to be a great team. I wrote almost the same thing. Basically, yeah, it's an outside chance, right? But he keeps showing up. I think he got here twice in the spring. Obviously, a game day, including the showcase, like you mentioned. Now here, to me, guys, it's a point of I think Wisconsin checks all the boxes for him. It's just does one of those programs like you mentioned, John, ND. I know there's been a lot of buzz. Michigan. Is that just thought of a little more highly for him? But I totally agree. I would put chances at 30 to 40 range. I think I would because USC, does he take the visit? Probably, but I don't see him going out west. I don't see Illinois, Stanford as really big options for him. Can't see him turning down all these schools to go to Purdue. So I've probably got Wisconsin kind of battling for around second right now.
It's not a bad place to be going into for a kid that's almost top 100. I got to learn the 24/7, Nick. So I got to start using the 24/7 ring because I promise I will. Let's just call him a super talented 4-star kid.
Yeah.
On the defensive side of the ball as well is former safety Zachary Taylor, who is coming to visit this weekend out of Katy, Texas. Obviously, Jordan High School powerhouse down there. The safety position is interesting as well because, the last couple of seasons we've seen Hunter Wohler as leading tackler on the team, but I think most people would agree if your safety is your leading tackler, it's not necessarily the best sign for your defense. But Taylor is an interesting guy to me. I think he kind of fits, what they're looking, as like a Preston Zachman type. To me, is sort of how he projects. But Nick, I'm interested on your thoughts here, and if you think he's going to end up as part of this class in the defensive backfield.
So this is one that I'm not sure about you, John. Like early on, I think he was a little bit more talkative with some interviews, and I think things have really picked up for him, which makes things a little bit harder to read. But I would say, Matt, I would love his fit. I mean, he's got cornerback, wide receiver type speed. And I don't think he's afraid to hit from where he's obviously coming from in that program as well. But he's a guy that I almost certainly expect to take more visits. Now, from what I understand, TCU is a big competitor here. And they actually, I believe, already had him on the OV. So, hey, maybe he just knocks it down to 2 and decides. But just kind of a gut feel. My gut has kind of told me throughout. I got a lot of faith in Haynes, Cooper, obviously at safety. And really that room, factor Pat Lambert a little bit in there, like they could sway him this weekend. Madison is kind of an amazing place to come up, but he's one my gut just tells me he might stay a little bit closer to home.
Yeah, Texas Tech is there too. I think they're going to hop in one of these weekends. He's got Houston, like you mentioned, TC, Nick. So
West Virginia as well, I know, is coming up for him.
West Virginia, Pittsburgh. So like you said, I think, like you said, Nick, things happen really quickly for him. Things kind of took off, and when that kind of happens, you're reshuffling your board, you're looking at options, you're looking where I'm going to get out to. I think it's like I said, a great sign that he's up there for Wisconsin's big weekend. It's going to be the biggest that they're going to have. But yeah, I think right now I would probably lean more towards the schools, down closer to Texas. But we'll see. A lot could change here in the next couple hours.
Definitely. I mean, that 10.5 he ran in the 100 this spring, I think opened a lot of eyes for a lot of people. I mean, 10.51 electric at his speed is
crazy.
At his size is definitely impressive. And you look at some of the, especially the safeties they brought in this 25 class, John, like that is, I mean, that's that same skill set for some of those guys from this year.
Well, that's Grant Dean-esque, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the name that immediately comes to mind.
Just blaze a time. Luke Emmerich, same thing. Like you put a 10.7 out there, and your phone's going to start ringing a little bit more than it has. And it sounds like maybe what happened to Zach Taylor. Just to go back to safety, you took free last year, and then as you're doing your early mock-ups, you're like, that might not be a position of need. But with a lot of these guys and their ability to play nickel potentially, I think it could get to 3.2 in this class with the amount of guys that they're bringing up. And the talent that they're getting on campus, it wouldn't surprise me if you had 3 guys, pegged to play safety, but, more of those athletes who could maybe play a few different spots in the defensive backfield depending on where they land.
Yeah, Nick, I'm surprised, though, that they don't have, like, really any corners coming this first weekend when, to me, that is a huge position of need.
I at first was kind of going through some of the numbers, and that popped into my head, but then I feel like based on what we've seen from the guys that came in last year already, some of those young 2025s, including Amari Washington, who hasn't gotten up yet. I think there's some confidence in that group. You've already got Carson Elam. I feel potentially pretty good about a guy like Theodore. Obviously, he's got to get up here, and there are some big-time programs there. But, I was looking at the list a little bit too, Matt. That made me think. I think it just more so speaks to some of the confidence of guys that are here now. I know a guy like, thinking back a few months, but like John, you'll remember, I mean, Wisconsin was all in for a while, a guy like Nick Hankins. And then he just kind of started to look elsewhere. And somebody else committed earlier to another guy from Texas, Marcel Gibson, that was going to be up. So that's just a position that sometimes you're just not going to force it if you don't see it in a guy, because you need those guys to be able to kind of provide good depth within the first, I would say, 2 seasons. So I think that shows, Jameer Scott. I'm super high, John, on Kairos Gaines. So I actually think Amari Washington, if it all clicks, has the highest ceiling of all 3. So I think that 25 class is going to be big for corners, jump up a little bit further in 27.
I'm glad you asked Nick about that first, because I was doing that cornerback breakdown, and they got Elam's, Theodore's coming up, and then where's that next piece there? So I think Nick answered the question well. The other piece of this is, do you want to flood that position with high school guys and then watch the bulk of them transfer because they're not playing year 1, year 2, because they've watched that happen? Amelia Agard's the last man standing from those last couple classes. So maybe you want to kind of get these guys that are going to be able to come in and play, or guys that could maybe wait a year or 2 and not flood it and then watch guys leave. And then, I don't think that you want to live in the portal at any position, but corner is a little bit more manageable, where I can get a veteran come here. He can play. He's got some experience at whatever that level that might be. They've done that again. You don't want to live there, but that's probably a spot where we feel like we can do a little bit more patchwork as needed, moving forward here. Because I don't know how much you want to invest in that high school recruiting. You want to bring 5 corners up, 4 of them don't play right away, and they're all a different school. I think that factors into it. Again, you're not going to shut down high school recruiting at any position. I'm not implying that, but you also got to look at what happened in the last 2 cycles with guys that were just looking to play right away, and they found those opportunities elsewhere.
Absolutely, John. Absolutely. Well, let's finally flip back to this side of the ball. Those guys the corners are covering and some wide receivers. I think they're, obviously they've already got Tayshaun Bardo in the fold, and he'll be up there on his official this weekend as well with Elam's, who you just mentioned, and quarterback Ryan Hopkins. We've talked about Zachary Washington a little bit, who's been a very long time target for them. But Jayden Petit, the receiver out of Florida. I know he's, some places have him listed as a tight end, but Wisconsin's definitely recruiting him as a receiver, as well as Nick Reddish. And I think both of these guys fall into the medium to long shot category, Nick. But who out of those two, who do you think is more likely to end up a Badger?
So Matt, maybe this is just the optimist in me a little bit. Mac knows that's just kind of how I approach things. But man, I've dug into these two, especially these last 2 weeks. I'll start with Reddish. I think Wisconsin has the chance to turn the tides here a little bit because I've spoken with him just earlier this week. Playing time is huge for him, right? And you lose starting safeties like after this year to the league or to eligibility, obviously with graduation. He's a guy that I believe could be in the 2 deep within the first year or so. So I would say I give them a medium shot for Reddish. And quite a good shot, Matt, for Jayden Petit. I mean, things have shaken up a little bit with his OBs. Oklahoma obviously has a lot to offer, so we'll see if he makes it there, things of that nature. But I've got Jordan Reed and the Badgers in the lead here in early June, late May. Not sure if they'll close just because he's got some big-time programs he wants to see. But, again, got up here twice during the spring, coming all the way from Florida. He is like this, very close with Jordan Reed. I couldn't see my fingers there, but I'm trying to say, like, obviously in lockstep. So we will see. I would say Petit a little better chance, but wouldn't be shocked at all if both those guys are in a good spot with Wisconsin mid-June.
Yeah, Reddish playing, obviously, I don't know why I was thinking of him as a slot. Obviously, he's going to be a defensive back, but my bad. Nonetheless, John, these two guys, where are we at?
Yeah. You go to Reddish and longtime target, right? I mean, he was there. I think Alex Grinch was starting his recruitment with him. Notre Dame's been the school that's been there and people talked about, but if it's been Notre Dame for so long, why isn't he there? I guess that's my biggest question. I think Wisconsin is in a good spot with him, but again, I mean, Notre Dame's scheduled to get him in a couple weeks. We'll see if he gets there. I like where Wisconsin's at. I think he brings a lot of versatility, a guy that could probably play nickel for if you need him to. But again, longtime target. I think Jack Cooper's done a nice job there. I don't know if I'm as confident about Petit as Nick is. He leans optimism, and that's a good thing. But look, you get a guy up twice in the spring with a 4-star kid from Florida. That's awfully impressive. And that speaks to his interest level in Wisconsin. So this weekend will be huge. I would imagine that coaching staff is going to try to squeeze that commitment out of him this weekend because, he's got Oklahoma coming up if he gets beyond this. Miami's there, a couple other schools. I think North Carolina's there as well.
Yep.
He's as unique of a talent as they'll likely bring up in this 26 cycle just because of the size, the ability to play that boundary spot, the spot that, Wisconsin's done a great job of slot-wise over the last 3 cycles. They haven't done a great job recruiting those receivers with some size. Petit would check that box all day long, and he would be just a home run get for a guy in his first cycle, Jordan Reed there, who's done a very nice job, and he's getting a good collection of talent coming up in June.
Yeah.
And if I could just add, Matt, real quickly, because some of these will be probably new listeners, watchers to me. I'm not going full homer. Like if he gets outed this weekend, uncommitted, confidence does go down a little bit, right? Because some of those are, decent college towns, obviously have plenty of NIL at some of those schools as well. So we will see. I personally, Oklahoma has just seemed a little bit less consistent to me than Wisconsin. I think Miami might scare you sometimes. Obviously, Florida, they've got unlimited funds, of course. And North Carolina, I have heard he likes. Belichick, doing some interesting things there on and off the field.
That's the right word to use. Interesting.
Yeah. So we will see. But no, I'm pretty confident. I heard from people just around the network, even within the last 2 weeks, at least in May, Wisconsin was in a good spot. So we'll see.
That's really interesting. And, you talk about Madison. Campus is going to show really well this weekend. 75 and sunny.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
I know that Pat Lambert and the rest of that staff are keeping their fingers crossed all the way through the weekend for that weather, no rain, no nothing like that, because as you know, Nick, like when you get those guys on those officials in May and June, like Madison in the summer, like special place.
It's special, man.
Special.
It really is. It really is.
Well, we hope that this show becomes a special place as well for all of you folks tuning in wherever you are. We appreciate it. We're going to be doing a lot of fun stuff here moving forward. So, Nick, thank you so much for letting me tag along with Jon to do this. Obviously, I've been a Jon stan for a long time. That's my guy right there. So I'm really excited that we get to, Jon, keep doing what we've been doing for a couple years now, talking recruiting and just having fun talking Badgers. So please make sure that you are subscribing to Badger247 for the message boards, the information, all that great stuff that you need to keep on top of everything Wisconsin sports. We'll be back again soon. For Nick Osen and Jon McNamara, I'm Matt Perkins. We'll see you next time.